This is Outfoxed, the podcast brought to you by Hunter.io, the trusted B2B lead generation platform built for every professional. Get ready for no playbooks, no posturing, and no egos. This is the show for the builders, not the theorists. Your host today is Hunter CEO Matt Tharp, and his guest, SEO godfather and entrepreneur, Rand Fishkin of SparkToro. Let's get into it.
Well, welcome to Outfoxed. Excited to be here. We got a tremendous guest with us, Rand Fishkin. If you're listening to Outfoxed, you probably know of Rand. If not, have read his book, have read many of his posts online and all the various media sources, YouTube. I'm sure you've probably covered all the bases at this point, Rand. Conferences. I feel like other than your own talk show at this point, you've probably covered it.
Yeah, thank God I don't have to do that. Matt, do you want to hear a crazy story? I was on the Oprah Winfrey show, like on her talk show.
Stop.
Yeah, with my wife back when it was in television syndication, like 2008. Yeah, so got to meet her and be on stage and stay at her hotel in Chicago. It was a weird experience, very weird experience.
Is that the top end celebrity experience you've had?
Let's see, from a third party's opinion, probably. I was once at a wedding seated next to Alfred Molina and BJ Wong and Lupita Nyong'o, who I have a huge crush on. It was super embarrassing. I did not look at her once. I was just like, nope.
That's awesome. So sitting next to those folks at the wedding had to probably, for your own purposes, be top of the list. That's awesome.
It was fun, but to be honest, I had a much better time hanging out with my actor friends who I was actually there to see get married.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, of course. I assume you were not in the wedding party, but still close to the people you were there to see.
Again, weird story. I made friends with a Shakespearean actor in a cereal aisle of a grocery store, as you do. That's how Shakespearean actors, I assume, meet friends.
Shakespearean actors are obsessed with American cereal, I think.
Can't get enough of that Cocoa Crisp is the problem. I'm not a big celebrity person, but I do love the arts. I'm deeply interested in things that humans create, not for money. I think that's a beautiful and wonderful part of being human. And I hope AI doesn't destroy that for all of us. Yeah, it is great to be here on the Outfoxed show.
That was a weird journey to the beginning. I appreciate we first off never ask celebrity questions and never take strange turns as we just did. So that's a first for the opening of Outfoxed.
I look forward to an hour more of this.
I think some total celebrity experiences, we could probably occupy another 30 seconds. So we'll just move on.
Okay, wait, give me some total of your experience.
Okay. The sum total of my celebrity experiences are I met Mike Tyson twice on the same ski trip, at the beginning of the trip and at the end of the trip. And this was in 1988. So this was peak Mike Tyson. And he was there with Robin Givens, but they weren't publicly an item yet. And they were there for an MTV. Remember when MTV did Spring Break? So they were in Vail for Spring Break where we were there to ski. And
How old were you?
oh gosh, well, let's see. I would have been 10 or 12 years old.
Okay. So you probably could have taken him.
I mean, that was really kind of what we were headed towards, clearly. I expected that I would have a shot at Robin, and he disagreed. No. So I'm like 10 or 12, so I'm old enough to know that he is somebody famous. I'm old enough to kind of recognize him. I know he's in the sports world. I'm running all these things through my head. I'm literally going through every football player. And Mike is not super tall. So I'm like, okay, running backs. I'm old enough at 10, 12 to know I've got to narrow the list to like running backs based on his stature. And we're in Stapleton Airport, which back in the day is how you'd get to Colorado if you didn't fly commercial. And we flew commercial, but it was a little puddle jumper. When you fly from Kansas, it's essentially like not flying commercial. That's a whole second story. So we get to Stapleton. It's literally me, my parents, Mike Tyson, 3 of his entourage, and 1 poor sap working the baggage claim. And he gets to be the guy to tell Mike Tyson they lost his luggage. And so my dad sends me away because Mike starts to throw a fit. He's like jumping up and down on the rotating thing, screaming about his luggage. My dad's like, okay, this is going to take a turn. Here's some quarters, which is also another thing that's never happened. Here's some quarters. Go play a game. I'm like kind of running because I don't want him to change his mind. So I'm going as fast as I can to play that game. And then I overhear the guy go, wait a minute. No. You mean to tell me I have to go in there and tell the world heavyweight champion of the world we lost his effing luggage? No. And so I'm like, wait, boom, lights go off. I'm sprinting back. I didn't get there in time. but apparently they had like a whole episode and they had to take him back into the back room. And then I see him again in the Denver airport on the way home. And the funny bit was when I go to lift up my luggage in Stapleton, I wasn't strong enough to get my parents' luggage up over the thing. And Mike come over and just like with 2 fingers. He made it absurd, right? He made fun of me. He lifts the thing and he reaches down, he squeezes my arm and he's like, you need to eat your Wheaties.
So celebrities and cereal.
Yep. Look at that.
They just go together.
They come together. Well, let's transition over to more professional topics. What's something going on with you right now that's SparkToro specific that's occupying a lot of your attention?
Let's see. I'm about to hire someone, kind of like a chief of staff / exec assistant person. And we're building a few new features in the product. My co-founder, Casey, and his family are coming over for dinner tonight. We don't get to see them too much. So that's kind of special and exciting. And we're in the process of some new research that's kind of cool. So I have this theory, Matt, that many people believe that AI tools are taking market share away from Google in the search space. But my theory is that actually the AI media hype is masking the fact that TikTok, Instagram, Reddit, YouTube, and Pinterest are taking a larger slice of search than AI tools are. And so I'm going to attempt to prove that with some data from our clickstream provider, Datos. And so we're in process on that right now to look at essentially changing growth rates and deltas and how many people are searching on each platform per month and that kind of thing. So that should be exciting research too.
That is going to be interesting. I'm fascinated by the topics that people think AI, like for example, everybody wants to say like, oh, it's going to eat all of your Google search traffic for your brand. But actually, if you're mentioned, there's no link. So if you go to ChatGPT and you ask a question like, what are the 5 best products for something? It'll tell you 5 names. Well, you're going to have to turn around and what most people do, they go into their Chrome bar and that turns into a search. And like everybody's talking like, I actually think that part of the reason Google is showing everybody that their traffic isn't going down is because of this. I think it probably isn't unless you're cited and only mentioned. There's no link. And if you're cited, the link isn't really kind of the primary object anyways.
Yeah, I think the creative destruction that's happening here is in the value of content that is not your brand or not the action that takes place on your website. So if you, over the past 20, 25 years, listen to digital marketers like this Jamoke, then you would have heard me say, oh, it's really great to produce lots of blog posts on topics that your audience cares about. They don't have to be directly relevant to your brand or what you sell, but you can attract those interest-based cohorts of individuals who will then sign up for your email newsletter or subscribe to your website. And then you can slowly nudge them into your audience and then they'll eventually purchase from you. That is the part that's really getting destroyed. And the other one, of course, is the value of media, right? So if you're a publisher in virtually any space, it is next to impossible to drag increasing traffic out of Google search or the AI tools or any of the social networks. All of that has declined. That's what Amanda Natividad and I call the zero-click world and why the next generation of marketers is certainly going to have to do zero-click type of marketing.
Yeah, I thought Perplexity was going to get more traction once everybody figured out it was trying to do a better job at Google than Google, and ChatGPT wasn't, right? When I think I assumed most people would go, oh, that's not the mental model I'm used to. This is. And yet, I don't know about everybody, but at least for Hunter, for example, ChatGPT is something like 90% of referred traffic, even though mentions don't have links. And so I find that whole thing a little mind-bending right now.
My strong theory here is that people who use AI tools very rarely want to replace Google. Google does an extremely good job of the thing that you're used to Google doing, which is provide me with links and quick information and Paul Rudd age, right? If you go to an AI tool, you have to give it sentences and paragraphs of information. If you go to Google, you can give it 2 words and it will generally spit back the thing that you want, even if you didn't type it correctly, even if you said it wrong. They know, right? They figured it out from usage patterns. I think that Perplexity, unfortunately, was trying to solve a problem that very few people have, which is I am frustrated by the quality, quantity style of answers that Google provides. But ChatGPT and Gemini and Claude recognize that most of what you want is generative tasks. It's not search replacement. It's, hey, design a room in a dungeon for my D&D campaign. Hey, double check that this test that I wrote for my code for my new software is running properly. Like, hey, go tell me the kinds of variables that I can put in PHP and convert from Python. It's all that kind of tasks. And those types of tasks, Google is no good at. So of course you go somewhere else for that. Hence the AI tools, Claude and ChatGPT in particular, dominate time spent, dominate percentage of use.
Yeah. It's interesting. Like, I would imagine ChatGPT's metrics are the exact opposite, like as far from Google's old core metrics as you can possibly get. It's a really interesting comparison.
It's just that marketers and technologists, who are in your LinkedIn feed, right, and are the loudest voices, they're the ones who have some motivated reasoning behind why they say, oh, Perplexity is going to replace Google. ChatGPT is going to replace Google. Things don't have to replace things, man. You know what? Facebook did not replace Google. I remember, I don't know if you remember, but like 2009, 2010, people are like, oh, Facebook is going to replace Google. No one's going to search on Google anymore when you can figure out what your friends are doing. Like, no, it was just dumb. I think AI is the same thing.
Also, none of us want to listen to our friends on Facebook about what we should do. Like, come on, let's be honest.
Definitely not in 2025.
It's the last place you want to get a how-to video. Oh, yeah. Man.
Might as well ask Grok. I mean, geez.
Well, ooh, that's a whole other thread, isn't it? Dangerous one at that.
You knew it was going to be spicy when you tuned in.
I mean, look, if we're going to go there so early, right? It's, let's not talk about Grok, though, because I don't have good things to say. I do want to talk a little bit about something that I know you care passionately about. We spend a lot of time focusing on it, and I think it's a great place to kick off, which is your audience, your ideal customer profile. So as most businesses do, either you started SparkToro thinking your customer was one thing and it turned out to be something else, or it started as one thing and has evolved over time. I'm curious, how does this SparkToro ideal customer or ideal audience match what you thought it was going to be when you started it?
I would say it's not massively different to who we expected, but the use case is very different to what we thought people would do with it. SparkToro tends to be about, I would say, 40% consultants and agencies. Another 35% are in-house marketers at brands and companies. They tend to be in the middle, not the most junior folks, not the CMO or VP, but like middle management or senior individual contributors in marketing universe. And then there's about 25% that's made up of everyone else. So founders and entrepreneurs, solo creators, researchers, educational use cases are quite strong, some government and nonprofit, that kind of stuff. That's not dissimilar to who we thought. Maybe we expected that nonprofit government EDU would be 10% and it turns out it's 15, or that's all on the margin. What's really different is we thought people would use SparkToro for tactical marketing improvements. For example, I am targeting a group of interior designers in the United States with my new CAD design program, architectural design program, and I want to try and take them all away from the products they're using now and get my little startup off the ground. And so I am going to target media outlets and YouTubers and podcasts and specific search terms and content ideas, whatever. I'm going to build lists of those. And then I'm going to go through and use the data that I got from SparkToro to do my outreach and try and pitch people, try and get in these shows, whatever. That is about 40, maybe as low as 30% of the use case. So it's not no one doing it. People are doing that. But a huge amount of our use is people, especially consultants and agencies and those managers at marketing firms, at in-house companies, using our data, especially the top level, like high level graphs of what people are doing, to pitch their boss or team or client or board on just investing in that marketing channel at all.
Makes sense.
That's the whole use case. They go to SparkToro, they get the overview page, they take a screenshot of the graph, they put it in their presentation, ding, 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 right? Like that's it. Maybe they'll go to the specific page for like websites or podcasts or whatever and pick out a few to put in the presentation to feature and say like, look at that, high audience affinity between this customer target for us and this particular publication or media outlet. But they don't use us to like build those tactical lists and do the specific outreach. That surprised us quite a bit. This was kind of a discovery we had last summer through Asia Rangio, who we contracted to do some product research for us. And she uncovered this finding in her interviews and surveys, presented it to us. And we were like, oh, crap, we should make the product way more visual. We should make the charts and graphs like everywhere. We should put the data that people are trying to screenshot front and center instead of making it export to CSV and then build it yourself in Excel or Google Sheets, right?
Is that the biggest shift from when you started? When you think about like the things that you've had to do with the product or with your audience or your content, is that the biggest shift?
Probably second, it sits behind. You might remember in the early days, Matt, SparkToro was built on Twitter data. We had data from lots of places, but Twitter was like our primary connector network. And then this billionaire buys Twitter. I don't know if you heard about this.
No, tell me more.
Yeah. And when that happened with SparkToro, basically the new owner changed a lot of how things worked on the platform in two ways. One was API access and data stuff. We could still get it, but it was more a pain in the butt to get the data. More serious than that, which made us not even want to go through the hoops that we had to jump through to get it, was that the culture and usage of the network changed dramatically. So we monitored hundreds of millions of tweets every day, right? Like we had a huge feed of all of them. And as an example, you might see that people who are into gardening in the UK would post on Twitter, not all of them every day, but hundreds of thousands of people who lived in the UK who were into gardening would talk about the flowers that were growing in their yard or whatever techniques for soil irrigation they had, all this kind of like detailed topic conversation. And with the new Twitter, like under new ownership, even in those first few months after Musk took over, we could see that basically that type of conversation was ending. People who were presumably still into gardening in the UK had stopped talking about their gardens and that hobby. People who were into biking stopped talking about biking. People who were into painting stopped talking about painting. People who were into software as a service, marketing stopped talking about that. And everything sort of shifted toward political and social issues. Essentially, the conversation switched almost entirely to a cage match fight between political and social viewpoints. And that's not useful data for marketers, unless you're running an election campaign, like not helpful at all. And so when we saw this in those first 90 days, Casey and I were like, oh, we have to switch. Like we can't use our primary data source anymore. We're going to have to go acquire new kinds of data. And we investigated a bunch of sources and looked at a bunch of possibilities and basically settled on clickstream data as being the foundation of the new version of the product. That was the biggest switch. It took almost a year to rebuild the product from scratch, make it useful enough to the people who had been using it that they wanted to continue using it, and also appeal to a new audience of people so that we could attract them. Very challenging. Like for a few months there, we worried we wouldn't have a company, scary.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about that time you started a company. At some point, you've reached an existential crisis moment, but nobody gets to really peek behind the curtain at how others handle those existential moments. I'm interested. What did you guys do? Did you have a process to follow? Tell me the story.
The story is, I remember the day we'd been sort of doing some rough analysis. We had some concerns, but I remember I was on vacation with some friends in Oaxaca, which is southern Mexico. And I'd never been to Mexico before. It was the first time there. Beautiful, but we were way out in the desert. Like we were driving from the city center out to a mezcaleria, right? Where they make mezcal, the beverage. And I had no reception, but I could see a bunch of panicked texts and emails from my co-founder, from Casey, that like things were imploding, things were getting increasingly terrible. And it was because like some of this analysis had been completed and he was like, we're done. Like we're sunk. In 6 months, this data will be useless to our customers, all that kind of stuff, right? And yeah, I remember we had a phone call from a gas station like 80 miles outside of Oaxaca in the middle of the desert, right? And afterwards, I was almost like a vomit-inducing, existential crisis. Like, how are we going to do anything? We couldn't come up with ideas on the fly, like on the phone call of what we could do. Any ideas that either of us had, the other one was like, no, that'll never work. And so it just became an iterative process over the next probably 2 or 3 months of us getting together on calls and over emails, and I tapped a bunch of people in my network to try and ask them about potential solutions. And we ran some tests with some clickstream data. Eventually, after landing on that as a potential idea, we had first investigated YouTube as being like a primary connector network. We hoped that would work. It doesn't work. Not enough people are on YouTube, and the creator system there is too top heavy. It didn't go down into the details of like what do hundreds of thousands and millions of people do and want. And yeah, I would say it was a quite unstructured process until we finally settled on, hey, we're going to try this experiment with clickstream. And then that started to look promising and eventually became the solution. But let me tell you, incredibly stressful. And, we had, I think, 1,500 paying subscribers at the time, right? Whose data was degrading every day. Just awful feeling.
How much before the customers did you guys figure out that this was going to be a problem? Was it almost simultaneous, or were you guys out ahead of this by at least a month or so?
Thank God we were out ahead of it probably by 6 to 9 months.
That's great.
Yeah, we noticed the shift happening, but our customers continue to have essentially useful data because people's habits and interests and proclivities, especially around niche interests, hobbies, like if you're into men's fashion or you're into buying drones or you're into you're a real estate agent who sells commercial properties in California, that rarely changes in the course of 6 months or a year. And so the data was still pretty darn good, maybe 80% good 12 months after the shift happened on Twitter. Like it's still pretty darn useful. If you analyzed year-old data, it didn't change all that much. That was thank God. But it was degrading by the day. And we knew that, and you could see it in our stats, right? Like, I want to say Musk bought Twitter in November of 2022. And by March of 23 was basically our high point at SparkToro. Like we'd been growing steadily since 2020 when we launched. We'd hit this high point. Then we kind of plateaued and started to slowly decline for a year and a half. We released the new version, made these updates. Now we've had, for the first time, like in the last 3 months, we've had like bloop, 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 going up. So turned around. Yeah.
Congrats. That's a great feeling, but oh man.
Great feeling. Oh my goodness. The last 100 days have been like, woohoo.
Wow. I'm just like putting myself in your shoes and I'm trying to think through such a massive industry shift. Partly I'm responding to the fact that I remember very early adopter on Twitter, was a very active user for a very long time. I kept my original account for years because I was just like, honestly, I was a little proud of being an OG. I think I was there 6 months in. I'm like, that feels like at that time that was pretty cool. And it's not like I was hugely active, but in those early days, I mean, especially if you're in the marketing space, like it was like the best place.
Yeah, it could make careers, right? Like it connected me with thousands of people who I know. And like today, it built a lot of my reputation. It was a huge part of SparkToro's first 2-3 years of marketing. It was how I got invited to conferences and events. It was how I distributed my research. It was how I got a lot of traffic to my blog posts. I put videos up there. Like it was huge. That actor friend I mentioned at the start, we first connected on Twitter. So like all this stuff, it was a beautiful ecosystem. It had its problems, absolutely. So yeah, there was that tragedy. But I had like 500,000 followers there, right? So I lost like it really lost out.
Wow. Yeah, that's a lot. So first off, I felt the change happened much faster. Like you were saying something like November was when the purchase happened. I feel like by definitely that first quarter, maybe even the end of Q1, I didn't go. I just wouldn't go on anymore.
No, the conversation had shifted for sure. That's what we saw in our data. And so then we knew we had like this ticking time bomb of when will this information no longer be useful to customers? And we had to artificially cut it off. We basically were like, okay, no new data ingestion after, I think it was like March of 23.
At Hunter, saw the ability to transition and to have as much lead time to manage that transition as possible. We saw something very similar because about 2 years ago, roughly, give or take, marketing agencies started to shift towards this new model of doing data, which was a data waterfall process. And there were products that were coming into the market like Clay that had enabled this kind of workflow where they were either using whatever they thought was the best one at the time, or they built their own tooling to kind of run a pipeline of data providers through a process to try to figure out the ultimate. Well, that was a completely new paradigm for products to be able to offer this. And so you can imagine marketing agencies would be a fairly sizable percentage of the customer base for Hunter. Being able to identify that as early as possible. This is one of the reasons why we talk about customer base and ICP a lot on Outfoxed, is that we saw that change happening. We saw it coming. It's not like you lose an enterprise customer when this happens, which is painful, or you miss the mark on a feature release, also painful. But when an entire segment of your customer population completely changes the way they do what you do, or a platform that they use completely changes, that's sizable. And that is something that if you don't have some advance notice, you may not make it.
And also fallbacks, right? Like you need diversity of channels, diversity of options, diversity of data sources. It's so critical, especially as an independent startup with not hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue, that you're able to say, oh, okay, this data source is gone. This customer group has changed their behavior. This platform where we used to get tons of marketing channel value is gone. What's next? Like, what other channels have we invested in? What other data sources do we have? What other customers could we serve with our product? If it's not something you've planned for, oh man, you're just sunk.
Today's episode is brought to you by Hunter.io. Finding the right email address for your leads can take hours, but with Hunter, you can go from search to send in minutes. Get started for free with Hunter's verified data, lead management, and email marketing tools by visiting www.hunter.io.
Yeah. Did you have a mechanism in place as like an early warning or an early, not because of this specific thing, because obviously you wouldn't have known.
I will tell you right now, we think about this a lot with LinkedIn. LinkedIn sends 60, maybe 70% of all our leads right now.
That's huge. Yeah.
That's a huge risk vector for the business, right? If something were to happen where, Amanda and I and the SparkToro account no longer get traction on LinkedIn, we get banned from it, LinkedIn changes how feeds work, any of those things, right? That is tons of risk for how we acquire basically new customers, new free accounts, how we distribute our message. It's way tougher to stand out in people's inboxes now. It's way tougher to get a blog post to do significant traffic because of all the zero-click things we talked about. But native content on LinkedIn performs extraordinarily well for us. Like that is a network that's basically replaced Twitter for Amanda and I. And high risk.
It is. And you're right, though. It feels like a lot of the business Twitterverse just shifted all of that energy onto LinkedIn. And that's now, I'm sure, a major crisis for LinkedIn. Like, what a strategic problem to have that your business network gold mine, you essentially can't integrate it with any of your business tools. Because as soon as you do, the focus of the platform becomes totally different. And now it's going to cause everybody to rethink their behavior on that. It's a funny problem to have.
Yeah, it is. I will say this. I wish it were still independent from Microsoft. Not that Microsoft's a terrible owner. As big corporations go, they're one of the more responsible, trustworthy ones with generally not that terrible practices, at least for their users and customers. I wouldn't want to compete with them, but I think that the frustrating part, and this is one of the reasons that I wish antitrust in the United States was just way more serious, right? Like an independent Instagram, an independent Twitter, an independent LinkedIn. What a difference that would make, right? Instead of WhatsApp, that it's not great that Facebook owns that too. There's just a lot of risk and frustration. I think Lena Khan, who was the previous director of the FTC under the Biden administration, who I think was a superb advocate for antitrust action and basically breaking up monopolies and keeping monopoly power from destroying economic opportunity in the US and around the world. She had a great little segment on Jon Stewart that I encourage anyone to watch. You'll learn a lot about basically practices that big companies engage in to stifle competition and how it harms almost every business. Like if you're listening to this podcast, you are probably being hurt by monopoly power, even if you don't realize it. And it's not a great thing, right? True in the AI world too.
You're talking about topics. What it means is that I'm not the only one sitting around constantly crunching these thoughts.
Absolutely not. No.
Like we have fewer and fewer marketing channels as businesses. If you go B2B, like B2B has fewer and fewer channels. LinkedIn is now a choke point for a lot of people in, especially given what we've seen happen in social media. Everybody wants to wall those gardens off, which means the data is, attribution gets harder to do. So I'm constantly thinking about the fact that like, you got to assume at this point, there's not a lot of growth of new channels, although maybe, but we haven't seen it. All we saw out of the social move was essentially consolidation. And so you think about this when it comes to entrepreneurship, the way you've experienced it, the way I've experienced it, it's changing, right? The idea of how I get my first customer, how I get my first 100 customers, in a lot of ways is getting harder. It's not as if tomorrow this is an impossible problem. It's that tomorrow it's a completely different problem. And I find that's the interesting thing. And I constantly am chewing on this because I'm like, how do you diversify channels? Let's say you're one of the businesses, this will be near and dear to both of our hearts, who's trying to use SEO as a way to grow their business, or that's the playbook they're used to or familiar with, right? Right now to the next 12 months, this is going to be something that they're going to have to reckon with. And I'm wondering, like, how did you get your first customer? Like, actually, just talk to the audience a little bit. If you are thinking about that first customer, or that first 10 or 100, what advice would you give people now with so much channel consolidation happening?
I think that the big piece of advice that's different from, let's say, 10 years ago, maybe even 5, but really 10, is you need to be thoughtfully aware of how these platforms have changed. So if you grew up in the era of Google sends a ton of traffic out, you can post tweets and get people to pay attention to you that way. You can relatively easily build a successful YouTube channel. You can quickly get traction on a Reddit or a LinkedIn or those kinds of places. Competition in all those places has gotten way more difficult. And all of those platforms have new preferences, new algorithmic systems that bias against linking out. And so if you want to attract customers in those places, which is still very possible, you need to treat them the way advertising agencies in 1965 treated billboards on the highway. I'm 100% serious, right? Like, they know when you drive, you drive by a billboard and you see a sign that says, drink Coca-Cola Classic. What you did not do was have, like, I don't know, some guy on a motorcycle follow that vehicle back to its house, write down the address, camp out outside the house, and then wait for them to buy Coke and see how much, and then attribute that to the billboard. Like that's not what happened, right? And so the way you do attribution and the way you do measurement, you got to throw that out the window because that has fully changed. And you have to recognize that the new way to measure, because measuring is still important. I'm not saying throw out measurement, but you have to do it the way Ogilvy and Mather did it in 65, which was what happened with same store sales in a 30-mile radius around the billboard, and what happened in, the next city over with the billboard we put up there, and what happened in the city where we put up no billboard, and what happened in the city where we put up 10 billboards. And like, then you test and you're like, aha, this density of billboards with this message for this audience in these regions works this well and results in this much lift over the statistical model that we would have predicted with seasonality included. Ta-da! Measurement based on lift, not attribution. We're throwing out this whole concept of attribution. And that means that when you choose your channels and your tactics and what you're going to invest in, I would recommend, especially if you're small and you're starting up and you're trying to get those first 100 customers, you should focus on things that you are personally passionate about and interested in. Channels and tactics that resonate with you, the human being. Here's something I've never heard, Matt, not in my whole life. Ugh, I'm so good at Instagram, but I really hate it. Nope. Doesn't happen. If you hate Instagram, don't use it for marketing. You're going to suck a bunch of time. Even if you think it's a good potential channel eventually for you, I don't care. Don't do it. Are you really good at one-to-one emails? Are you great at conferences and events? Are you good at offline branding and physical sandwich boards, in neighborhoods and guerrilla campaigns where you tack up posters against telephone poles in densely populated cities? Hell, go for it, man. Do the thing that you're good at. 100 customers is so small in the massive economies that we live in. It's such a tiny number. Focus on the thing that you're really good at. And then just make sure that it fits these other parameters, which is that your audience actually pays attention to those places. So if you're great at tacking up billboards on or posters on telephone poles, but none of your customers live in that neighborhood, you're going to have a bad time, right? And in the digital world, if you're like, oh, I'm so good at Reddit, but there's no communities on Reddit where your audience is paying attention to that topic, it's not going to work, right? You need to transition like, oh, maybe there's Reddit-like communities on LinkedIn or Discord or, whatever it is. You need to be in those places. So your audience is there. You're passionate about it, and you got to be able to do something unique. You have to find some way that you stand out from the rest of your competitors who are also good at that network and doing things there. That could be that your video content is way more expressive and creative and artistic. It could be that your messaging is just way better. It could be that you're amazing at telling stories with data, or maybe you're fantastic at, comic style illustrations that people love to copy and paste. Like whatever it is, you got to have something unique to stand out from the crowd. You got to have your audience actually be on the platform, and you need to be personally passionate and interested in it. Those are the three.
I love it. It's a bunch of really good explanations for why you should go back and blow the dust off of your Ogilvy on advertising book. It's true. A lot of what you said, first off, was physical. A lot of the things that you commented on were more like non-digital.
Yeah, because the analogy works in the digital era too. And also, it's never been easier to stand out in the offline world. It's weird to say, but the offline world is almost carte blanche compared to digital, which is so overcrowded with every kind of marketer and campaign, and just the dollars in digital advertising is crazy. If you can be creative in the real world and your customers are there, that's a huge win.
It's great advice. I mean, I really hope people listen to that and think about it more, is not being so beholden to attribution. Something I'll take away from this conversation, because I think it's a really important reminder to not get so hooked on performance marketing techniques that you can't take a step back and rethink about brand. And just being different and remembering what are the essence of the things that make you unique and make you stand out in the market. And I love it. And finding a place where you can generate the least amount of noise for the most amount of attention. That's a constantly moving target.
Yeah, that ratio is so important. Absolutely.
Yeah. That's the thing you're trying to optimize for. I love that. I think that's good advice, especially because you're right. 0 to 100. I actually think, and this is partly the reason I keyed in on this, is this has been in the back of my mind, but I think as AI demonstrates, it's so easy to fake so much. It's a pendulum. It always swings back. If we've decided that Gen AI is the end of the pendulum swing in one direction, there's an inevitability for it to come back and people to respond and say, well, I'm a human. I want to talk to another human to make sure I'm making a good decision. I don't think that's going to decrease. I think if anything, that's a better opportunity for the next few years to get some attention.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that AI will help clever people do more clever things with their marketing and their content and their ideation and their brainstorming and all that kind of stuff. And some unfortunately misled people will think that they're supposed to use it to create content that they should publish and create emails that they should send and create video interviews that they should post on YouTube. And those people are all going to have a bad time, right? There's going to be one story out of 100,000 of oh my God, look at this virtual influencer who built this, incredible campaign. It's all using AI. And then you're going to look for the second example and you never find it, right? But everybody points to the one and they're like, see, AI is going to take over. We've been here before, friends. Do you remember how Web3 was going to be the future of all technology?
Yes.
We're supposed to be having this conversation on the blockchain right now.
That's right. Yeah. Every word is saved to its own specific place on the chain. Yeah.
Instance, exactly. And you can only connect them up if you got the key. Yeah. Anyway, also, this is supposed to be unavailable on the desktop web, and we're supposed to have a mobile app, which is the only exclusive place where you can access this conversation. That would be the 2009 version of this advice, right?
You're leaning more towards the optimistic sentiment than it sounds like when it comes to AI, because the examples that you've just portrayed in this conversation are at least 3 moments in the last 10 years where supposedly the thing that happened was going to end all the other things that happened, and it's never really come.
Virtual reality is the other one, right? Virtual and augmented reality is the sort of the fourth example of that never appeared. So anyway, anytime these hype cycles come, and I'm not saying AI is all hype, it's a useful technology. Absolutely it is. Is it as transformational as the invention of the computer or the internet as a whole? I don't think so. Is it third in line behind those? Maybe mobile's even bigger. But what I would say is just be cautious in assuming that everything is going to change overnight and that AI is going to take everyone's jobs. Like it's not realistic. And very frankly, I will say this one thing about AI, which is if you are trying to get budget to do something, you should probably put AI in your pitch, because there's a lot of, I don't want to use a pejorative term. There are many human beings who are in various positions of management whose executive teams basically have said no more spending on anything unless it's AI. And so I was talking to a friend. I'm not going to name which of the big tech companies here in Seattle they are at, but I was like, I know you went through a reorg recently. And he was like, well, I'm doing exactly the same job that I was before. My manager just didn't want any of us getting fired. So they renamed our team AI. And now we can do our jobs in peace, right? And I was like, oh yeah, like everybody else, right? And I was with a second person from a different big tech company in Seattle who was like, that just happened to me.
So I read today, 2% of GDP is currently committed to AI projects. And the article, I forget, I'd love to quote it, and I'm doing a terrible job, but it basically said
I read the same one.
Okay, where they're like, look, everybody's made a big bet on AGI. So if it doesn't happen now, there's a huge recession coming. It's just like, it's going to kill 2% of GDP right there at a minimum. And it's actually going to be a lot higher than that. It was a really fascinating idea that if AGI doesn't get here in the next 12 months, there's a different kind of deep shit we're all going to be in.
I would point folks to the dot-com crash, right? Which was almost exactly this flavor of hype cycle and media attention. The internet took off, right? Dot-coms eventually took off. But the hype was so crazy between 1995 and 2000, as it has been from 2021 to today. The hype was so crazy. There were expectations so high. The stock prices so high, like all these kinds of things. When that dot-com collapse and recession happened, the interesting part was that it really hit this one sector of the economy really hard. And then a lot of other sectors kind of grew and matured and adopted the technology over the next few years. I would just encourage anyone who's thinking, my whole life, personally and professionally, is that I'm an AI expert. Maybe just diversify a little bit to protect yourself. Be good at anything else, right? In addition to AI.
I have one more question or a line of questions. I want to hear you answer. Do you consider yourself a salesperson?
Oh, gosh, definitely not. I don't know, Matt, if you probably have never done this, but if you email SparkToro support and you ask for a demo or to talk to a salesperson or an account manager or whatever, the reply that myself or Amanda will send is, sorry, we don't have those people. We're just a tiny team of 3. We don't do sales. We will not do SOC 2 compliance. We will not sign a contract with you. If you have a credit card, feel free to sign up for a free account and then try it out and pay for the version online. But we don't do anything else. And I was the same way at Moz, my first startup. I don't think I am good at sales, at least one-on-one. I'll tell you a very embarrassing story. I know we love stories. First 6 months after SparkToro launched, Casey and I thought, hey, you know what? Sometimes you got to bite the bullet and do sales, right? It's early days. We got to get this startup off the ground. So when people would write in, I would give them demos. You might write in, we'd schedule something, we'd hop on a call. I'd be showing you SparkToro over in this corner over here, presenting it, running through your audiences, typing things up, talking to your team. I always had very engaging chats. I felt like I learned things about companies and people and agencies, and it wasn't bad. There was nothing wrong with it. But my conversion rate from the first 130 demos that I did over the course of maybe 9 months was 2 signups.
Wow.
2 people who I had talked to on those calls signed up for SparkToro. Maybe more, but we couldn't tell because they didn't use the same email. I don't know. But every day, 5 or 6 people signed up out talking to me. Why? Why was I doing this? What? One of 2 things is happening, right? One, which this is possible, totally possible. Rand is the world's worst salesperson. He is actually turning you off. As soon as you start talking to him about SparkToro, you're like, well, I was excited about this product, but then the founder talked to me about what they made and I just, Or the people who wanted demos were not right matches for the product. I think it was this one. That's what I hope anyway. I tell myself so I can sleep well at night and not cry myself into a corner. I think that if you need that sales process, you're probably not a good match for SparkToro. And so maybe if I were a better salesperson, I'd be over here. But this is something I would tell founders. So like if you are listening to this and you're a founder or you're an early stage company, you're joining one, build your company to optimize for the things that you're great at and not need the things that you suck at. I know a lot of the advice out there is like find a co-founder who, will take care of the things that you suck at, that you're not good at. I sort of disagree. Can you design a business that doesn't need that thing you're no good at or that you don't enjoy? You can. You can design a company to not need your weaknesses.
And when the company gets so big that that's the thing that you have to fill, right? Then you can hire people. Yeah, 100%.
Now you have a high quality problem that can be fixed with money. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that though. It's great advice. I think it's really hard to follow because especially when you're early days, if a customer calls, the instinct kicks in and you're like, I should talk to them. That's the right answer. I need to be good at this. The founder should be the best salesperson. Doesn't always work out. But I think reminding you that you need to optimize for your strengths, I think is really key. I think, look, the hunter audience, I think there are a lot of people in the hunter customer base, but even in the audience that don't think of themselves as salespeople and yet are going to have to do sales-like activities. Sending an outbound campaign, actually doing, some face-to-face conversations, like getting out and kind of being the boots on the ground from time to time.
I do a ton of that. Oh, absolutely. Right. Sales-like activities where, for example, hey, this whatever person in the media covered this report. You know what? I need to go find their email and reach out to them and like have a conversation and be like, hey, when the Wall Street Journal wrote about this, what you didn't consider was this point. And I wish that had been included. Or like, hey, when you wrote about us, you called us a market research firm. That is not what we do. Would you mind fixing that? Very important in the age of AI where ChatGPT is going to call you the thing that the Wall Street Journal called you, right? And so I do a ton of these for events, right? Where I'm like reaching out to people and trying to pitch them on coming to our events or joining something. I do tons of sales-like activities when I'm networking with people around a million different topics, right? I had to do lots of sales-like activity to raise money for Snack Bar Studio and for SparkToro before it. So absolutely.
Yeah. This is, I think, a common theme. Some of the things that actually keep people out of entrepreneurism is a fear of the selling piece. And that's why I really like the advice, build a business that doesn't need you to be good at something you're not good at. I think it's great.
But you or your team has to be good at either marketing or sales. You can't be bad at both of them. Otherwise, there's no customer acquisition. And I don't know if you've heard, businesses tend to need customers.
At least a couple of them. Exactly. We'll play a little word game since your person who's built businesses is good at marketing, does not consider yourself a salesperson. What would you call, like if you said to a colleague, let's send a cold email campaign, would you call it cold email or would you call it something else?
Ooh, I've rarely recommended it, but we have done some direct email outreach. I don't know if it counts as cold because we always would have the email. Like we'd already have that person's email or we'd like have a connection to them in some way. Yeah. Journalist outreach would be the exception. When I've done journalist and creator outreach, that's like a cold campaign, but it's one-to-one.
But you wouldn't refer to it as a cold campaign. You would just consider it outreach.
You're right. I'd call it media pitching or direct outreach or creator outreach. Yeah. YouTuber outreach. Exactly.
The reason we ask these questions is, I'll tell you this in a second. So ideal customer profile, an ICP, is that what you would call it?
My formal language in business world is pretty bad because I kind of stumbled into everything. I think that's a great term. I like it. I know many people who use it. I will often say our core customer, our key customer, our best customers are, but ICP works great.
Okay. There's a bunch of these, but I think one of the challenges that James and I have had as we've analyzed our customers and really tried to understand our audience as well as we can. We have a bit of a horizontal business, right? Just about anybody who's B2B needs what we do at some point, which is an amazing product to have.
Amazing place to be in. Yes.
However, if you talk to somebody who's a recruiter, they might not call it cold email. They might not refer to it as an ICP. And actually, if you said ICP and you didn't say the whole word, they might look at you funny.
The International Center for Photography on Fifth Avenue in New York? What does that have to do with anything?
We had a photographer, photojournalist, who it turns out, not only was he an active user, I met him, by the way, in a side conversation. I reached out to him about his photography. I was like, hey, I'd love some advice. We started chatting. I said, by the way, what my day job is. And he was like, you're kidding. I'm like, no. He's like, I'm a customer. I'm like, this is great. Let's talk. But would have never used the words cold email or cold outreach. It was a pitch. And we discovered this is one of the funny things is that if you come from our industry, you would think everybody uses like 4 keywords. And it turns out the vast majority of people I've spoken to verbally who are customers or Hunter users don't use any of those terms. And we find it fascinating that a product like ours continues to grow and exist and reach people and create value. Sorry, now I'm sound like I'm selling Hunter. That I get excited about what we do for this reason.
I mean, we're SparkToro is a customer. We use you guys. We have an direct integration. Hundreds of our customers use Hunter through SparkToro, right? So like, I'm a fan. I totally get it. Let me give you the one challenge level up from your challenge.
Please, please.
People don't know what audience research is. And when we tell them like, well, how do you figure out if, for example, your ICP or your customers or your audience are using AI tools more than they're using traditional search, or that they're listening to this media publication more than that one, or that which YouTube channels they follow, or what podcasts they listen to. What most of our customers and audience tell us is, I have no word for that. It's no one's job. My manager probably should care about it, but doesn't. And that has, I think, more than anything else that we do, that severely impacts like the limitation of, what we're doing. However, I have faced this same challenge before. When I started doing SEO in 2003, if I told someone I did SEO, they were either like, what the hell is that? Or they were like, that's spam. Like, you're a spammer, right? Which I'm sure you guys have heard too. And it took me 15 years to like, not me alone, right? But like me plus thousands of other people in the SEO industry to like nudge the whole marketing universe and every company to be like, oh, SEO is just a standard practice we should all engage in because Google is going to dominate how people find information in the world. Aha, I should be present in that place where my audience pays attention. And now I'm trying to be like, well, what if your audience does not exclusively pay attention to Google? What if there are other places they pay attention to, other channels and platforms? How do you figure that out? And how do you know which ones? That's what audience research is. Someone should do that. The nice part is SparkToro, to my knowledge, has no competitors. So like, oh, that's nice.
We should talk separate from this because I do think it would be great to see if there's some way we can partner together for data information. Like there's clearly some interesting things that we should explore here. And
I would love that. I mean, I've been a big fan of you guys for forever, recommended you for years. So yeah, absolutely happy to chat. And then, the other thing that I would say is, if you're a founder, again, or you're early stage, and you are looking for a relatively easy path to get those first 100 customers, it's not a bad idea to choose a sector that almost nobody else is in. Competition is very low. It's easier to get traction, especially if the message resonates. What gets harder is when you want to grow past, a few million or, $10 million of revenue in that space. In a space like ours, right? Audience research, where people don't have a word for it and they don't know to do it. That's where you really bump up against that difficulty of getting over the chasm, right? To use the Clay Christensen term. And if instead you're like, I'm an old pro at this, I'm an expert, I can crush any early stage startup. Great, my friend, pick a category that's big and go head to head with the competitors. So one of my other companies, AlertMouse, is doing that, going into the email alert space, which is essentially dominated by people like Mention and TalkWalker and BuzzSumo and Google Alerts, right? And all these players. And we're like, hey, let's go head to head with those guys. And everybody knows what an email alert does. Everybody needs it. So it's sort of fascinating to get to play both of these games as an entrepreneur, right?
Yes, 100%. What I was realizing is there's probably a few folks listening who may not be as good at marketing. And in that case, I probably wouldn't suggest market where there's no competitors.
You have to be able to make noise and have people pay attention.
You have to. That's the key. You don't have to define a category, but you kind of are.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This goes back to our choose companies that leverage your strengths and ignore your weaknesses.
Yeah, exactly. Pounding advice, people. You got to put it all together if it's going to work. This has really been wonderful. Great conversation. We didn't get to everything, but honestly, we probably would have taken 2 hours to do that, and it would have been great. It's great to see you. I hope we get a chance to do it again.
Yeah, real pleasure, Matt. If you find yourself in Seattle, Washington, you should definitely drop me a line. And I hope we get to do this again sometime soon. It's really been a pleasure.
Let's do it. I appreciate it. Thanks, Rand.
Take care.
Once again, thank you to Rand for joining today's episode of Outfoxed. If you like what you heard, please like, subscribe, and explore even more of the Outfoxed community by visiting www.outfoxed.hunter.io. He was Rand Fishkin, that was Matt Tharp, and we're out of time.